Unforgiven from 1992. This movie is directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood, along with Gene Hackman, Richard Harris, and Morgan Freeman. The plot summary: retired Old West gunslinger William Money reluctantly takes on one last job with the help of his old partner Ned Logan and a young man, the Schofield Kid. So this movie did a couple things for me, and why I put it at number one. First, it showed that, well, it kind of was part of my journey in terms of loving the Western genre, which is another one of those things I did during that 1 6 month period of unemployment. Rented a lot of those from Netflix DVD. This is basically a pitch for Netflix bringing back the DVD by mail rental, I think. So that was one thing. But more importantly, it really opened my eyes to how movies can be made more deeper by having seen other films, and not in a way where it's like you're watching Jaws and, oh, it's the shot from Vertigo that Hitchcock made. Okay, that is like a surface level thing, but in a way, like, movies can be within dialogue of one another. And if you're a lot of older films, especially in the Western genre, but in other genres too, newer films, you have a deeper appreciation for them having seen other things. So it's not like you have to see it. It's not like coming in at part 5 in Harry Potter series, and if you don't see the first 4, you can't do it. But it adds extra layers to it. So I was someone who did not like Westerns growing up as a kid, thought they were boring. This actually might have even been like the first even Clint Eastwood film I saw appear. Like, I wasn't he's one of my favorite actors of all time. I'm obsessed with Clint Eastwood, but I was not always he wasn't like my guy growing up. It wasn't like an Arnold or like a Johnny Depp or something, or Tom Cruise. I just was like, I don't know, Clint Western's boring. I'm not going to watch it. And I saw this film in the 90s. I'm in high school, and I thought it was really good. Solid film. But then during this period of time when I decided, I'm going to go back and watch get more into the Western genre, something I kind of written off as a kid. Started with classic Westerns, a lot of the old John Ford films, Stagecoach, Oxbow Incident, Searchers, High Noon. Then where I literally chronologically like worked my way up into like modernist Westerns, like The Wild Bunch, and, seen more Leone films, like I talked about Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in the last episode. And then I got into some Clint stuff beyond the Leone films, like Outlaw Josie Wales, Pale Rider. I watched every single one of Clint's Westerns. And then I came back to this movie, and all of a sudden, to me, like the postmodern tone of this film, where it's like honoring and giving an homage to the classic genre of Western, but at the same time criticizing it too, and doing those two things, which I think was new for postmodern Westerns. It just opened my eyes to that. I was like, whoa, like a movie can be better because other movies. Like, this is crazy. And I now, this is one of my favorite films of all time. And I'll kind of get into a little bit about what I sort of mean. It's like, Clint in this film is an old man. The first time you see him, he's in a pig farm. He's a single father, 2 young kids, wrestling with pigs in the mud. Just this old guy. That's his introduction in this film. In The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, he comes in, he's like the hero. There's a little shootout moment. You see him from the back of his head. He gets this huge hero shot reveal thing. You're like, this is the god. And in this movie, it's like, wait, this is some guy wrestling around in the mud. And yeah, it works without having known about Clint and the all the films he'd made before that, where he was this amazing hero. But it adds more layers to it if you've seen that character. It's like twists the Clint Eastwood persona. He can't ride a horse. There's a scene he's trying to fire his gun and he can't even shoot. And this is a guy, like, again, in all these movies, he can shoot 20 people in 5 seconds. And it's like, and again, you understand, the movie puts that into the plot, but it adds more layers if you know this about Clint. And even too, I think, and Clint says this was not at all part of what he was trying to do here, but it is because this character was a gunslinger who murdered all these guys, and he's the baddest gun in the West in Unforgiven, and now he's retired and he's renouncing violence and anti-violence. In a way, I feel like that's almost Clint, and is like in a meta way,
right?
Expressing not an apology, but like an acceptance. Like, yeah, I was playing all these horrible guys who did all this violence on screen and was glorifying it, and now I'm kind of coming to terms with it. Again, Clint denies is what he was doing, but even as an audience member, at least that's sort of what I take away from it. And again, if without really understanding his whole persona and watching all these Dirty Harry films and all these Westerns, it's there, right? But it's even deeper now, having known that about him. And I think, having known the Western genre too, people get killed all, especially in those classic westerns. Like people die and it's like, okay, cool, or it's not a big deal, and they just kind of get shot and fall off a horse and that's it, and the film moves on. It's about, some other thing. Or when the hero kills the bad guy, it's a very simple kind of black and white thing. Oh, great, the hero's dead. But in this movie, like the violence that's in it is not at all played for heroics, or at least in the first 90% of it, right? So as part of this film, the reason why Clint and his guys are coming back out and doing this one last job is this prostitute gets cut up and he has to go kill these cowboys that did it. And he's doing it for money, but that's the plot. And when they finally kill those cowboys in the film, it's not like cathartic. You don't feel like this is justice being done. You're off put. The characters are kind of off put by it. It's like twisting your expectations of, okay, I've seen a ton of Westerns. I know how this goes. I'm going to love this as the audience when the bad guys get killed, but you don't feel that at all. You're like, oh shit, this is like bad. And then Clint also, and the other two guys too, they don't feel this is right, but they do it. So it's questioning those things that, again, I think for me at least, were elevated by having gone back and known the tropes of the Western genre a little bit. And then the brilliant thing this film does is turns that whole thing on its head at the very end. When you do get that cathartic moment of Clint coming in and being a really awesome gunslinger guy and kills all these guys at the very end, and then you do actually think that's cool and root for it, but then you question it yourself a little bit. It's like, that's like the moment that if in a normal Western, or the ones that I had seen, that's the whole film, is that Clint being cool, right, being a cool dude, killing guys, and you cheer it on. But now, having explored the genre more and seen it again after at the end of my, exploration of the Western genre, it hit me a lot harder. And again, like having a dialogue between films was something I never even really thought of, other than, again, homages and visual cribbing and things like that. But now it's opened my eyes to a lot more appreciation for newer movies that come out, and going back and understanding what were the films they're in dialogue with. How is No Country for Old Men, like, how is it talking about the Western genre? What is it trying to say? How is it playing off of what other Westerns have done in the past? And it really opened up my eyes to how film is so it like pays off exponentially. Like the more movies you see, the more they can talk to each other in new and exciting ways. So but yeah, on its own, the movie's awesome too. But that realization came to me upon having done a Western exploration and then seeing this film a second time, and now it's again one of my favorites.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had not watched this movie before this. Maybe I'd watched a couple of scenes here and there. This was a new one for me.
And, cool.
And I think I mentioned it before to you off mic or on mic as well, perhaps, that I'm not really a Westerns genre person. Maybe I've seen a few kind of modern ones like No Country for Old Men, but I'm not that familiar. And frankly, I've not really seeked it out. But I think this movie, speaking of the branch analogy, it might actually open up a new branch for me, because this movie was incredible. Even without, I'm obviously not been living under a rock, so I know Clint's, mythology and all of it, so I can see some of that. But even without those layers, playing in a deep way like they played for you, this movie is just so incredibly constructed, technically, but also emotionally. You're totally swept away with these characters, this town. And then at the end of it, yes, there is that thing of kind of questioning, what was all this for? And is the big cathartic moment even cathartic at all? So there's that. But there's also this thing of kind of like, so much of Westerns to me is about the stories we tell each other around campfires, right? Like that's always the vibe I get. And at some point you sort of question at the end of the movie, is any of this true? Was Clint's character, the things that he's known for, the bad things that he's done, which shows up as like text in the beginning of the movie and at the end as well, is any of that even true? Schofield certainly was not true. He had not killed anybody before. You question that about Gene Hackman's character as well. Like, so what's true in this world? It's very unclear. And what stories we tell, what gets aggrandized, who gets put up on a pedestal by society around you, but also yourself. Like with Gene Hackman, putting together his own house, having these rules of no alcohol, no guns in a town called Big Whiskey or whatever the name of the town is.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like he in a way is trying to, put up this artifice himself to either forgive himself perhaps, or to just make like a new persona, which is realized by him almost keeping this author captive,
Right, right.
kind of writing stories for him. So I think the movie is in dialogue with just the general mythology of westerns and storytelling, and who we see as heroes and who we don't. But then there are other layers of the price you pay as heroes, and should you be even looked at a hero as, and of course the Clint meta layer is another layer. So it's just so deep, and then on top of it, like brilliantly acted, brilliantly made, the score, the cinematography, the shots, all of it. Like this is a classic, and it's now made me want to go and seek out westerns. So I might hit you up later to get a bit of a cheat sheet of what should I watch next.
Yeah, no, it's actually a mutual friend of ours. I put together a list, and he like went through, because I think westerns more than any other genre to me, I'll talk a little more westerns at the end, but like going in order, and you see the evolution of the genre, it makes the movies more powerful when because they do really play off. Like modernist westerns are trying to buck the conventions of the classical, and the postmodern, they're going back to some of that classical, but they're questioning, like, should we be bucking? What should we be keeping? And the other reason why I love westerns is on top of that whole layer is really this genre comments about the attitudes of the American culture about America itself. What are they thinking? In the classical westerns in the 30s, there's good guys, there's bad guys. Good guys always win. America's great. Why are we don't even think about questioning it because we're always the good guys. And the modernist westerns like, oh, there's sort of some bad stuff going on here. And those were in the 60s, 70s. That's when America was questioning the evils of the Vietnam War. Why are we doing this? And then there's Watergate. And then all of a sudden now there's no good guys and bad guys. They're all kind of bad anti-heroes.
Right.
And then you get the 90s where, we want some anti-heroes, but we need some kind of, okay, America's doing something good. We just won the Cold War. There are some things in here, so let's salvage a little bit of it, even though we have to be realistic and still say, violence is bad and all the things this film is doing. So like that is why westerns, after getting into them, they're one of my favorite genres now, because there's such a way of the filmmakers at the time and the artists and the storytellers to comment on about America, specifically like what does America mean? And then they put it in the Old West, and that's how they tell that story. So
pretty amazing.
It's now one of my favorite genres, one that I never liked until this one period. So yeah, if you are interested, I do have that list that I sent to him, and he went through it, and it's like maybe 8 or 9 films, and it ends with Unforgiven. I feel like Unforgiven is like the final step, but you kind of work through a list to get there. A lot of great films, but yeah, I'm glad you liked it, and it might spark a branch for you.
No, I'm so happy that I watched it. But yeah, and we'll be happy to look at that list as well.
Yeah.
So,
hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.